You know, there are people out there who say that Stephen Miller is aroused by brutal authoritarianism. That's so crass. I would never say stuff like that on this show, but there are people out there who are willing to say it. But in listening to and watching this latest clip of Stephen Miller talk about the survival of humanity itself depending on Republicans winning these midterm elections, I couldn't help but think maybe there is something to it about this guy getting off on authoritarianism. I'm going to play a clip for you. This is the rhetoric of an authoritarian movement preparing its followers to believe that anything up to and including violence is justified. Because if you lose the election, this could mean that your family gets destroyed, your children are destroyed or taken from you or radicalized, and that even civilization itself might not survive if Democrats take control of the House. A little hyperbolic. It's a little hyperbolic. But here is Stephen Miller explaining it.
That's my point. Yes, exactly. They are communists. They call themselves the Democrat Socialists. They believe in total state control of capital. So this is a philosophy. This is an ideology. It starts with coercion, and it ends always in violent, repressive bloodshed. So it's not just a question of we disagree with them. We have a different point of view. The very survival of freedom, liberty, humanity, your family, your children, your future depends on ensuring that we do not allow communism to take hold in America. And that's why President Trump has courageously and necessarily framed this upcoming election around keeping communists out of power. Because if they gain power, then you, the American people, will lose everything.
I know I've said
Stephen Miller is not saying we have much better tax policy, which will be economically stimulative and therefore we should be supported. He's not arguing on the issue of healthcare policy, Democrats are wrong, or we've really got him on immigration. What Stephen Miller is saying is that your family, your kids, your liberty, the survival of humanity depends on stopping communism from taking hold. And what is the alleged communism? It's Democrats, mostly center-left Democrats, winning an election. Our friend Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who's an historian and a scholar of authoritarianism, she immediately recognized what Stephen Miller was doing, and she put out a tweet where she said, quote, "Sounds like Mussolini. Survivalist rhetoric is designed to elicit and sustain violence by getting people to believe they are existentially threatened. Great replacement theory is another version of survivalist thinking, and this is the exact mechanism that is at play here. If losing an election means people with policies you don't love would get to have power, and then you would have to organize and try to win the next one, that is not going to cut it in this world of everything is the end of the world. But if losing an election means that your children and humanity itself might not survive, you can justify almost anything as self-defense. And it includes, hey, we've got to reject the results of this election. We might have to commit violence in order to beat back the rigging that they are claiming is going to take place. Now, the communism accusation is really absurd, really absurd. Are there communists? Yes. Do some of them angrily email me and say, David, you should be a communist? Yet that exists. Democrats and the Democratic Party are not communists. They're not going to abolish private property if they take control of the House of Representatives. They're not going to establish a dictatorship of the proletariat. None of those things are happening. And the word communism is being used by these MAGAs to just portray ordinary political opponents as Soviet-style authoritarian communists, as alien, as illegitimate. And they're not. You can be for or against communism and separate out whether your average Democrat in 2026 is a communist or has communistic ideas. Now, then there's this whole great replacement theory or rhetoric. And I've talked about this before, but it's been a while. Great replacement theory is the idea that people are being erased on the basis of identity. And so when Tucker Carlson did his famous, now famous or infamous rant from a couple years ago, actually, it was several years ago when he was on Fox News, where he said, immigrants make the country dirtier and poorer. And there's this invasion of immigrants that are pushing aside just your average, I guess, white person and taking jobs and all of this stuff. That's great replacement theory. And you can use a lot of different language and still refer fundamentally to great replacement theory. And if you imply that that's what's going to take place if Democrats win, therefore, any means necessary to prevent Democrats from winning becomes a question of surviving. And so that is what Stephen Miller is doing. Now, Stephen Miller is not literally Mussolini or anything like that. He's using a recognizable authoritarian strategy and language. Every election is the last election. If we don't win this one, it is over. Every single opponent is the worst, most evil existential enemy, and only the leader's movement can save you. And democratic movements tend to say, here's why our policies are better. Authoritarian movements say, if you lose, there may not be a future. And what Stephen Miller is choosing is that second message. There is a lot. I mean, listen, if anybody would be justified in using the apocalyptic messaging, it really is the left about the MAGA movement. Because if Trump were allowed to do whatever he wants, he has said he would prefer to be a dictator rather than to deal with democracy. He said he would prefer to just be able to stay in power indefinitely rather than be term limited. He has said he would love to have no adversarial media or critical reporting. He would love to militarize the streets of American cities, and he has actually done it to some degree. If you just go through the list, Democrats are presenting ideas which you may not like, but they are not even remotely authoritarian. Trump is presenting ideas where if he could get away with it or believed that he could get away with it, would put the country down an authoritarian path. And as I've said before, left-wing and right-wing authoritarianism end up kind of looking the same when executed to their full conclusion. So we would be far more justified in using this apocalyptic rhetoric about Republicans. We're still not doing it. And we are offering policy while they are offering fear and villains and scapegoating and this sort of stuff. So consider that, think about it, and think about whether these fears are born out of reality or born out of an attempt to manipulate the electorate, maybe an electorate that is not smart enough or informed enough to tell the difference. Thanks for watching. Check out this other video. And if you like our content, make sure to subscribe so YouTube puts our videos in your feed, and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple.